Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hey. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hey. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Rakshamam. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Presthaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Pashyatya Desha Charine. Om Ajnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Trinadapi Sunichena Torad Iva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. Hare Nam, Hare Nam, Haranameva Kevalam, Kalo Nastyeva, Nastyeva, Nastyeva Gatir Anyata. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this section of the Krishna book is divided into two parts. Today we will cover the rainy season, and next week we will cover the autumn season. So we're hearing the conversation between Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. So this is entitled The Rainy Season. In India, after the scorching heat of the summer, the rainy season is very welcome. The clouds accumulating in the sky, covering the sun and moon, become very pleasing to the people, and so they expect rainfall at every moment. After summer, the advent of the rainy season is considered to be a life-giving source for everyone. The thunder and occasional lightning are also pleasurable to the people. The symptoms of the rainy season may be compared to the symptoms of the living entities who are covered by the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. The unlimited sky is like the supreme Brahman, and the tiny living creatures are like the covered sky, or Brahman, covered by the three modes of material nature. Originally, everyone is part and parcel of Brahman, and the supreme Brahman, or the unlimited sky, can never be covered by a cloud, but a portion of it can be covered. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Mamaivangsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manakshashtani indriyani prakriti stani karshati. The living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, but they are only an insignificant portion of the Supreme Lord. This portion is covered by the modes of material nature, and therefore the living entities are residing within this material world. The Brahma Jyoti, or spiritual effulgence, is just like the sunshine. As the sunshine is full of molecular shining particles, so the Brahma Jyoti is full of minute portions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. out of that unlimited expansion of minute portions of the Supreme Lord, some are covered by the influence of material nature, whereas others are free. Clouds are the accumulated water drawn from the land by the sunshine. Continually for 8 months, the sun evaporates all kinds of water from the surface of the globe, and this water is accumulated in the shape of clouds, which are distributed as water when there is need. So similarly, a government exacts various taxes from the citizens, which the citizens are able to pay by their different material activities, namely agriculture, trade, and industry. Thus, the government can also exact taxes in the form of income tax and sales tax. And this is compared to the sun's drawing water from the earth. For when there is again need of water on the surface of the earth, the same sunshine converts the water into clouds and distributes it all over the earth. Similarly, the taxes collected by the government must be distributed to the people again as educational work, public work, sanitary work, etc. This is very essential for a good government. The government should not simply exact tax for useless squandering. The tax collection should be utilized for the public welfare of the state. Here is the third metaphor used by Shukadev. During the rainy season, there are strong winds blustering all over the country and carrying clouds from one place to another in order to distribute life-giving water to the needy living entities. And when water is urgently needed after the summer season, the clouds are just like a rich man who, in times of need, distributes his wealth even by exhausting his whole treasury. So the clouds exhaust themselves by distributing water all over the surface of the globe. Here, Prabhupada interjects his own comment. For example, when Maharaj Dasharatha, father of Lord Ramachandra, used to fight with his enemies, it was said that Dasharatha approached them just like a farmer uprooting unnecessary plants and trees. And when there was need of giving charity, Dasharatha used to distribute money exactly as the cloud distributes rain. The distribution of the rain cloud by the clouds is so sumptuous that it is compared to the distribution of wealth by a great munificent person. The cloud's downpour is so sufficient that the rains even fall on rocks and hills and on the oceans and seas where there is no need for water. So, it is just like a charitable person who opens the treasury for distribution and does not discriminate whether the charity is needed or not. He or she gives in charity open-handedly. Now the fourth analogy. Before the rainfall, the whole surface of the globe becomes almost depleted of all kinds of energies and appears very lean. After the rainfall, the whole surface of the earth becomes green with vegetation and appears to be very healthy and strong. So here a comparison is made to the person undergoing austerities for the fulfillment of a material desire. The flourishing condition of the earth after a rainy season is compared to the fulfillment of material desires. Sometimes, when a country is subjugated by an undesirable government, people and parties undergo severe penances and austerities in order to get control of the government. And when they attain control, they flourish by giving themselves generous salaries. This temporary profit is like the flourishing of the earth in the rainy season. Actually, one should undergo severe austerities and penances only to achieve spiritual happiness. So here, Prabhupada interjects. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is recommended, Nayang deho deha bhajang nirloke, kashtan kaman arhate vid bhujangye, tapo divyang putraka yena sattvam, shudyed yasmad brahmasaukyam tvanamtam. Tapasya, or austerity, should be accepted for realizing the Supreme Lord. By accepting austerity in devotional service, one regains his or her spiritual life. And as soon as one regains one's spiritual life, he or she enjoys unlimited spiritual bliss. So now, I would like to make my own comment. We see twice in this sentence, Prabhupada has used the word regain. That means originally we had a spiritual life. Before coming to this material world, we had a spiritual life in Vaikuntha, in the kingdom of God. But somehow or other we became envious of God, and therefore we entered this material world. So we lost our devotional service. But by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, we regain that spiritual life. You can't regain something you never had. So the very use of the word regain twice indicates Prabhupada's philosophy that originally we were in the spiritual world. Prabhupada continues now, but if someone undertakes austerities and penances for some material gain, then, as it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, antavattu phalang teshang tad bhavat yalpamedasam devan deva yajo yanti madbhakta yanti mamapi. The results are temporary, and they are desired by people of less intelligence. Now comes number 5. During the rainy season in the evening, there are many glowworms visible about the tops of the trees, hither and thither. And they glitter just like lights. But the luminaries of the sky, the stars and the moon, are not visible. Similarly, in this age of Kali, persons who are atheists or miscreants become very prominently visible, whereas those persons who are actually following Vedic principles for spiritual emancipation are practically obscured. This age of Kali Yuga is compared to the rainy, cloudy season of the living entities. In this age, real knowledge is covered by the influence of material advancement of civilization. The cheap mental speculators, atheists, and manufacturers of so-called religious principles become prominent like the glowworms, whereas persons strictly following the Vedic principles or scriptural injunctions become covered by the clouds of this age of Kali. So people should learn to take advantage of the actual luminaries of the sky, namely the sun, the moon, and the stars, instead of the light of the glowworm. Actually, the glowworm cannot give any real light in the darkness of night. As the clouds sometimes clear, even in the rainy season, and sometimes the moon, stars, and sun become visible, so even in this Kali Yuga, there are sometimes advantages. For example, sometimes Lord Chaitanya's Vedic movement of distributing the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is heard. People seriously eager to find real light should take advantage of this Sankirtan movement instead of looking toward the light of mental speculators and atheists. So I'd like to make my own comment here that our weekly Krishna book class is a tiny little fragment of Lord Chaitanya's Vedic movement. So rest assured that when you attend this class and you pay close attention, you are participating in Sankirtan. Now comes the sixth analogy. After the first rainfall, when there is a thundering sound in the clouds, all the frogs begin to croak, just like students suddenly engaged in reading their studies. Students are generally supposed to rise early in the morning. They do not usually arise out of their own accord, but only when there is a bell sounded in the temple or in the spiritual institution. By the order of the spiritual master, they immediately rise, and after finishing their morning duties, they sit down to study the Vedas or chant Vedic mantras. When I first joined the temple in Brooklyn, they would do that. Everyone would get up 3:30 in the morning, and one devotee had the duty of ringing a large bell, and he would go through all the different corridors and floors of the temple to wake all the devotees up by ringing a very, very large bell. So I have some experience of what is mentioned here in this section. Everyone is sleeping in the darkness of Kali Yuga, but when there is a great Acharya by his calling only, everyone takes to the study of the Vedas to acquire actual knowledge. So this reminds me of Srila Prabhupada. Everyone in America was sleeping in the darkness of Kali Yuga. But when Prabhupada came in September of 1965 and started his ISKCON movement in July of 1966, by his calling, people began to take to the study of the Vedic knowledge, because Prabhupada always emphasized his books. Prabhupada was not just simply interested in building temples. Yes, temples must be there, but Prabhupada emphasized that the temple was meant to be an educational institution. So Prabhupada instituted morning class and evening class. Everyone living in the temple had to attend both classes because Prabhupada wanted his disciples to be very learned in the science of Krishna consciousness. Now we come to the seventh analogy. During the rainy season, many small ponds, lakes, and rivulets become filled with water. Otherwise, the rest of the year they remain dry. So similarly, materialistic persons are dry, but sometimes when they are in a so-called opulent position, with a house and children and a bank balance, they appear to be flourishing. But immediately afterwards, they become dry again, like small rivulets and ponds. Prabhupada now comments. The poet Vidyapati sang, Tatala Saikati Vari Bindu Sama, Sutamita Ramani Samaje. In the society of friends, family, children, wife, etc., there is certainly some pleasure, but that pleasure is compared to a drop of water in the desert. Everyone is hankering after happiness, just as in the desert, everyone is hankering after water. And if in the desert there is a drop of water, it may, of course, be said that there is water, but the benefit from that drop of water is very insignificant. So, in our materialistic way of life, which is just like a desert, we are hankering after an ocean of happiness. But in the form of society, friends, and mundane love, we are getting no more than a drop of water. Our satisfaction is never achieved, just as the small rivulets, lakes, and ponds are never filled with water in the dry season. Number 8. Due to the rainfall, the grass, trees, and vegetation look very green. Sometimes the grass is covered by a certain kind of red insect. And when the green and red combine with the umbrella-like mushrooms, the entire scene changes, just like a person who has suddenly become rich. The farmer then becomes very happy to see his field full of grains. But the capitalists, who are always unaware of the activities of a supernatural power, become unhappy because they are afraid of a competitive price due to abundant production. In some places, certain capitalists in the government restrict the farmers' production of grain, not knowing the actual fact that all food grains are supplied by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to the Vedic injunction, Eko Bahunang Yo Vididhati Kaman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead maintains this creation. Therefore, it is Krishna who arranges for a supply of whatever is required for all living entities. So when there is a population increase, it is the business of the Supreme Lord to feed the people. But atheists and miscreants do not like the abundant production of food grains, especially if their own business might be hampered. Number 9. During the rainy season, all living entities in the land, sky, and water become very much refreshed, exactly like one who engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Prabhupada now comments, we have practical experience of this with our students in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So this Krishna book was written by Prabhupada in 1969 when he was staying in Los Angeles for an extended period. Before becoming students, they were dirty looking, although they had naturally beautiful personal features, because Prabhupada's first disciples were hippies. That's what it's referring to. Due to having no information of Krishna consciousness, they appeared very dirty and wretched. But since they have taken to Krishna consciousness, their health has improved, and by their following the rules and regulations, their bodily luster has increased. And when they are dressed with saffron-colored cloth, with tilak on their foreheads, and beads in their hands and on their necks, they look exactly as if they have come directly from Vaikuntha, the spiritual world. Number 10. In the rainy season, when the rivers swell and rush to the oceans and seas, they appear to agitate the ocean. So similarly, if a person who is engaged in mystic yoga is not very much advanced in spiritual life, one can become agitated by the sex impulse. Number 11. Although during the rainy season, the high mountains are splashed by torrents of rain, they do not change. Similarly, a person who is advanced in Krishna consciousness, even if put into difficulties, is not embarrassed. For a person who is spiritually advanced accepts any adverse condition of life as the mercy of the Lord, and thus he or she is completely eligible to enter the spiritual kingdom. Number 12. In the rainy season, some of the roads are not frequently used, and so they become covered with long grass. These roads are exactly like a Brahmana who is not accustomed to studying and practicing the reformatory methods of the Vedic injunctions. Therefore, one becomes covered with the long grass of Maya. In that condition, forgetful of one's constitutional nature, he or she forgets one's position of eternal servitorship to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By being deviated by the seasonal overgrowth of long grasses created by Maya, a person identifies with Maya production and succumbs to illusion, forgetting one's spiritual life. Number 13. During the rainy season, lightning appears in one group of clouds and then immediately in another group of clouds. This phenomenon is compared to a lusty woman who does not fix her mind on one man. A cloud is compared to a qualified person because it pours rain and gives sustenance to many people. A man who is qualified similarly gives sustenance to many living creatures, such as family members or many workers in the business. Unfortunately, his whole life can be disturbed by a wife who divorces him. And when the husband is disturbed, the whole family is ruined, the children are dispersed, or the business is closed, and everything is affected. It is therefore recommended that a woman desiring to advance in Krishna consciousness live peacefully with a husband, and that the couple should not separate under any condition. Just as a side note, when I married my wife, that was actually part of the wedding vows. The priest had me and my wife both say, "And there will never be any separation." And my wife said it extra forcefully, just to make a point. The husband and wife should control sex indulgence and concentrate their minds on Krishna consciousness so that their life may be successful. After all, In the material world, a man requires a woman, and a woman requires a man. And when they are combined, they should live peacefully in Krishna consciousness and should not be restless like the lightning flashing from one group of clouds to another. 14. Sometimes, in addition to the roaring thunder of the clouds, there is an appearance of a rainbow, which stands as a bow without a string. Actually, a bow is in the curved position, being tied at its two ends by the bowstring. But in the rainbow, there is no such string, and yet it rests in the sky so beautifully. Similarly, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead descends to this material world, Krishna appears just like an ordinary human being. But Krishna is never resting on any material condition. So I want to emphasize that when Krishna descends, he appears just like an ordinary human being. But as we have already seen, whether Krishna is a 1-month-old baby in the lap of Putana, or now we see that Krishna is growing up. At this point, Krishna is around 5 or 6 years old. We see that all throughout, Krishna did not act like an ordinary human being, for when it was necessary, he demonstrated that he was God. Putana realized that from the very beginning. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Ajopi son avyayatma, bhutanang ishvaropi son, prakriting swamadhishtaya, sambhavam yatma mayaya. Krishna appears by his internal potency, which is free from the bondage of the external potency. So what is bondage for the ordinary creature is freedom for the personality of Godhead, Krishna. Number 15. In the rainy season, the moonlight is covered by clouds, but is visible at intervals. And so it sometimes appears that the moon is moving with the movement of the clouds, but actually the moon is still. Due to the clouds, it also appears to move. Similarly, for one who has identified with the moving material world, one's actual spiritual luster is covered by illusion. And with the movement of material activities, one thinks that he or she is moving through different spheres of life. So this is due to false ego, which is the demarcation between spiritual and material existence, just as the moving cloud is the demarcation between moonlight and darkness. So I want to point out this phrase, false ego. False ego implies that there must be true ego. So yes, true ego, my eternal ego, my original ego, is that I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. As I already mentioned some minutes past, when Prabhupada used that word regain, I already have my spiritual ego, my spiritual identity. But now I am in the material world, and that true ego, that spiritual ego, is now covered by a false ego. So the false ego is, I am man, I am woman, I am American, I am Indian, I am Christian, I am Hindu, I am president, I am basketball star. No, that's not who I am. That's false ego or temporary designation. Real, true, original, spiritual ego, I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. Number 16. In the rainy season, when the clouds appear for the first time, the peacocks dance with joy upon seeing them. The peacocks can be compared to persons who are very harassed in the materialistic way of life. But if they can find the association of a person engaged in the loving devotional service of the Lord, they can become enlightened and dance just like peacocks. Prabhupada comments, we have practical experience of this. Many of our students were dry and morose previous to their coming to Krishna consciousness. But once having come into contact with devotees, they are now dancing like jubilant peacocks. So that was my experience also. Before joining the temple, I was extremely morose, extremely depressed, very unhappy. But once I joined the temple and started to chant, dance, and of course, take prasad, I too started dancing like a peacock. Number 17. Plants and creepers grow by drinking water from the ground. So similarly, a person practicing austerities becomes dry. But after the austere performances are completed and one gets the result, then he or she begins to enjoy life in sense gratification with family, society, love, house, and other paraphernalia. One becomes jolly like newly grown plants and grass. Number 18. Sometimes it is seen that cranes and ducks meander continually on the banks of the lakes and rivers, although the banks are filled with muddy garbage and thorny creepers. Similarly, persons who are householders without Krishna consciousness are constantly tarrying in material life in spite of all kinds of inconveniences. So in family life or any life, one cannot be perfectly happy without being Krishna conscious. The great Acharya, Srila Narottama Das Thakur, thus prays, Grihe ba vanete thake, ha goranga bole dake, Narottama mage tar sanga. Narottam prays that he will have the association of a person, either a householder or a man in the renounced order of life, but who is engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and is always crying out the name, Gauranga, Chaitanya, Gora, Hari. For the materialistic person, worldly affairs become too much aggressive, whereas to a person who is in Krishna consciousness, everything appears to be happily situated. Number 19. The barriers around the agricultural field sometimes break due to heavy torrents of rain. Similarly, the unauthorized atheistic propaganda in the age of Kali breaks the boundary of the Vedic injunctions. Thus, people gradually degenerate to godlessness. Final one for today, number 20. In the rainy season, the clouds, tossed by the winds, deliver water which is welcomed like nectar. And when the Vedic followers, such as the Brahmanas, inspire rich men like kings and members of the wealthy mercantile community to give charity in the performance of great sacrifices, the distribution of such wealth is also nectarian. The four sections of human society, namely Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, are meant to live peacefully in a cooperative mood. And this is possible when they are guided by expert Vedic Brahmanas who perform sacrifices and distribute wealth equally. So now we will do the prayers to Lord Nrsingadev as blessings to all my Krishna book students. And I'm very happy to see that today we had 26 family members. Very, very nice, very encouraging. So these Nrsinga prayers are for my 26 Krishna book students. May Krishna bless you and protect you. Namaste Narasimhaya Praklada Klada Dayane Hiranya Kashi Purvakshaha Shilatanga Nakalaye Ito Nrsinga Parato Nrsingo Yato Yato Yamitato Nrsinha Bahi Nrsingo Hridaye Nrsinho Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Sringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bringam Keshavadrita Narahadi Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Keshavadrita Narahadi Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadish Jaya Jagadish Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Tat Sat.